Question number 1 in the name of Deputy B. Hall Martin.
I propose to take 1 to 20 together, Cancorla.
1 to 20 together.
St Patrick's Day has become a truly global festival which presents us with an unparalleled opportunity to engage with political decision makers to advance Irish causes and advocate on their behalf, and to focus on our #1 priority of job creation by promoting Ireland as a preferred partner for trade and investment, as the home of world-leading products, services and companies, and as a high-quality destination for tourists and international students. This year, my visit to the United States encompassed Atlanta, Austin, Texas and Washington, D.C., with a programme focused on engagement with political leaders at national, state and city level, trade and investment events and company meetings, as well as events for the Irish community and friends across the United States. My principal focus was to highlight Ireland's economic recovery and to enhance our bilateral trade and investment links in order to boost job creation in Ireland. I also took every opportunity to publicly and privately press the case for immigration reform and to advocate for the undocumented Irish, not just in meetings with the administration and the congressional leadership, but with political figures at all levels throughout my visit. On this occasion, my programme did not permit meetings with the groups which lobby incessantly on behalf of the undocumented, although the government remains in ongoing close contact with them through our embassy and through our consulates in the US. My programme began in Atlanta, Georgia, where my engagements included a number of business-focused events, including at the Irish Chamber of Commerce in Atlanta, where I delivered a keynote address on Ireland's economic recovery and a roundtable engagement with IDA client companies and potential investors from the Atlanta region. I also held meetings with companies including Coca-Cola, which is a major investor throughout Ireland, and Oldcastle, which is the largest Irish-owned company in the United States. I had a range of engagements with senior political figures, including the Governor of Georgia, Nathan Dail, and the Mayor of Atlanta, Kasim Reed. I also had the opportunity to engage with both senators from the state of Georgia, Johnny Isaacson and David Perdue. Our discussions covered business links between Georgia and Ireland, immigration reform and the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. I might say that the appointment of a consulate down there, Cancorla, was really worthwhile in the sense of making arrangements for contacts with political personnel from here, meeting business personnel and politicians from that area. Had the opportunity to engage with the wider Irish community, as well as a number of influential friends of Ireland at a range of other events. These included the St Patrick's Day Dignitaries Breakfast, which took place before the Atlanta Parade, which I attended as Grand Marshal, the Irish Consul General's St Patrick's Day reception, a meeting with the Atlanta-based members of the Global Irish Network, and a traditional Irish community event at Atlanta City Hall dedicated to Father O'Reilly, an Irish priest who was responsible for the saving of City Hall, 5 churches and 400 homes from being burned down during the American Civil War. I also undertook a number of US and international media engagements, including with CNN International, to highlight the message of Ireland's economic recovery. I travelled from there to Austin, Texas, where my engagements included officially opening the new House of Ireland in Austin, Ireland House, which will house our new Consulate General in the city, as well as the Enterprise Ireland and IDA Ireland offices. Ireland is the first European country to open a consulate in the city, which is America's fastest growing city and has become a major technology hub. I participated in a range of events at South by Southwest Interactive, which has become one of the world's largest technology festivals. I visited the Enterprise Ireland stand, where I met with a number of innovative Irish technology companies and also spoke at an Enterprise Ireland event focused on enhancing links between the Irish startups and venture capital funds. I participated in a keynote public interview focused on Ireland's strengths as a global technology hub. I also addressed an audience of current and potential investors in Ireland at an event organised by IDA Ireland, and I met with senior executives of Dail, which is based in Texas. At a political level, I met with the Governor of Texas, Mr. Greg Abbott, where our discussions focused on enhancing the trade and investment relationship between Ireland and Texas, as well as immigration reform. My programme in Washington was primarily focused on high-level political engagement and business promotion. My bilateral meeting with President Obama at the White House was positive and wide-ranging indeed. We discussed Ireland's economic recovery, developments within the European Union and the Eurozone. We had a useful exchange on the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership and agreed on the benefits of concluding an ambitious agreement as soon as possible. While we did not discuss any specific cases, we did discuss the situation in Northern Ireland at that time and the implementation of the Stormont House Agreement. The US administration continues to be a crucial partner in the peace process and are fully familiar with the key issues. I thanked President Obama and Vice President Biden for their personal engagement and indeed for the work of Senator Gary Hart in Northern Ireland. I thanked the President for his efforts on immigration reform and stressed our continued determination to make progress on behalf of the undocumented Irish. We discussed a range of international issues, including the Ukraine crisis, the Ebola outbreak, the threat posed by ISIS, and the prospects for both the Middle East peace process and the Non-Proliferation Treaty. On this occasion, we did not specifically discuss the issues of refugees displaced by conflicts in the Middle East. I attended the traditional breakfast hosted by the Vice President, Joe Biden, and the lunch hosted by the Speaker, Mr. John Boehner. I also held meetings with a number of other congressional leaders, including Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and Minority Leader Harry Reid, Senator Pat Leahy, and a number of other senior figures, including the Congressional Friends of Ireland group. In each of these engagements, Ceann, I emphasised the importance which we attach to addressing the plight of the undocumented Irish, and I urged all sides to work towards achieving immigration reform. I also raised this issue with the Speaker of the House of Representatives, John Boehner, during his visit to Ireland on the 2nd of July. As recently as last week, Minister Flanagan was engaging with congressional contacts on these issues during his visit to Washington, DC. I had a number of business-focused engagements, including a high-level roundtable organised by the US Chamber of Commerce and a business leaders' lunch organised by our enterprise promotion agencies. I addressed a Science Foundation Ireland event to announce new industry academic partnerships and to honour prominent Irish and Irish-American scientists. I addressed the American Ireland Fund Gala Dinner, which gathered contributors to the fund and key members of the Irish-American community. In addition to talking about Ireland's economic recovery, I also paid tribute to the important work of the fund in contributing to peace and reconciliation on this island. I was pleased to have the opportunity to launch the Celebrating a Century of Irish Arts and Culture event, which will take place next year in 2016 at the Kennedy Centre in Washington, DC, and will form a centrepiece of our global commemorations of the 1916 Rising. Overall, I have to say my visit to the US in March was extremely positive. There was an extraordinary level of interest in Ireland's improving economic recovery, as well as tremendous confidence and optimism about the potential for further job creation, for further trade and investment and tourism in the country.
Thank you, Taoiseach, for your reply, but could I just say before we proceed any further that we should note that some of these questions have been waiting for a reply for at least 6 months, and there's been ongoing cancellations for various reasons of the weekly meetings or the weekly Taoiseach's questions, and they've never been rescheduled. And I think it's a demonstration of the government's ongoing disdain for this House and for accountability to the House. I think we all welcome, Taoiseach, the recent executive action by President Obama in terms of the undocumented and in terms of migration generally. It has taken some of the most immediate pressure off undocumented people in the United States. But as we know, it only goes as far as the presidential control of the executive branch extends, and the substantive issue of giving long-term security to the undocumented has not been addressed. And you mentioned in your reply meeting with various members of Congress, and what would worry me is that there seems to be an increasing trend, certainly there's the current anti-immigrant tone of some of the statements made by presidential candidates, for example, is not something which would give one hope that the Republican Party will end its blocking of comprehensive immigration reform anytime soon, and it's been one of the big blockages in terms of immigration reform. And I think, Taoiseach, we should join with the condemnation of statements which demonise and vilify economic migrants wherever they are from, and I'm asking the Taoiseach to agreed to this request. There's been some very inflammatory comments made in the context of the presidential election in the United States by certain candidates in relation to economic migrants, and I think it's unacceptable. And we should be very forthright in our views on that. I think it's something we need to keep working on, the plight of the undocumented. I know you've had a series of meetings. You didn't meet, you say, with the lobby groups on this occasion. And I'm not sure whether the ebb and flow of elections will make a deal possible or not, but I think lobbying does matter. And I would ask you, Taoiseach, what has been prepared in terms of lobbying the new leadership of the House of Representatives? There's been a change recently, and perhaps you might indicate to us whether the government has fresh plans in terms of lobbying on behalf of the undocumented. You mentioned also in your reply, Taoiseach, a meeting that involved a number of scientists, key scientists. I think it's a good opportunity to comment on the awarding of the Nobel Prize for Medicine to Donegal native Professor Bill Campbell. He's part of a very significant number of Irish research students, or scientists, working in American universities and research facilities. Professor Campbell's work is benefiting millions, and our warm congratulations are due to him. Now, you may not know, Taoiseach, but he did not receive acknowledgement in the government's St. Patrick's Day science event, and perhaps this will be remedied or addressed next year. From 1970, I think he deserves some acknowledgement by our own state in terms of his achievements, and at least an acknowledgement in St. Patrick's Day, and he didn't get it this year. From 1997 onwards, Taoiseach, a big movement was made, a big policy shift was made in attracting Irish researchers home. But this has gone directly into reverse in the last 3 years. There's been a significant change in science and research policy here by your government. And as a petition signed by more than 800 internationally recognised competitive and leading researchers in Irish universities said earlier this year, government policies directly pushing them out of the country. That's what they said. 800 people signed that. And the problem is that basic research, exactly the type of research undertaken by Professor Campbell, has been downgraded for funding, and the area of non-commercially linked basic research in medicine has been removed from funding schemes. Ireland's most internationally successful research group, the Immunology Research Centre in Trinity, was unable to secure funding from the main Science Foundation Ireland scheme in spite of being the #1 ranked facility in the world. It's had that leading position because of its publications and so on for quite some time now. So, Taoiseach, I would put it to you that when you're meeting with American leaders and when you're travelling to the United States, it's time to stop the speeches and telling people about our commitment to basic research and to pure science. And you should do something to keep research scientists in this country. And it's a very significant issue for the future of the country, and it's one that I think that you've fallen down on.
Thanks very much, Deputy Martin. I realise these questions are relevant to a period quite a number of months ago. I think the offer was always there to have a written reply granted immediately, but that wasn't requested. But that applies, I think, in all cases. As I say, I congratulated the President on his executive action in terms of immigration, and did meet with the representatives Reid, McConnell, Leahy and the Friends of Ireland. I really don't think that there is much going to happen in terms of long-term immigration reform in the United States now, given the run into the sort of difficulties that the parties are having and the preparations, I suppose, for the beginning of primaries and all of that in terms of a presidential election later next year. I would hope that wouldn't be right, and that speaking to our ambassador in America in New York at the United Nations just last week, she made the point that she continues to work very diligently with the representatives on the Hill, as they say, about this, and a number of other opportunities that arise in terms of perhaps surplus quotas from other granted to other nations that may be considered important, and also to speak to Speaker Boehner before he retires officially from his from the Speaker's role, as to perhaps requests that he may wish to make there. I agree with you. Inflammatory comments by candidates are not warranted, particularly in regard to immigrant people. Don't we know about that more than anybody ourselves? I happened to be in Strokestown House yesterday in Roscommon, where over 3,000 people were evicted from that estate, where 1,400 had to walk to Dublin and take the boat to Liverpool and take their chances on coffin ships to Canada and the United States. And actually, if you have the chance sometime, go through the museum down there and see the pictures from Eritrea and the pictures from Ireland of 1845 and 1847. A very little difference. And obviously, the comments being made by some candidates in respect of immigrant people are to be condemned. In fact, I opened a facility here in Dublin recently, where the chief financial executive is an immigrant person who came here with parents who acquired refugee status, and it contributes greatly to our economy, to the running of our economy, and that we should be very proud of that mix that's there. So I agree with you. Comments being made by candidates in these elections are not warranted and should be condemned. I'll see to it that the question of the Nobel Prize, I agree on that in terms of complimenting Professor Campbell for his works. Speaking to the Science Foundation Ireland and the issues for research and innovation, this is an area that is increasing in importance, and obviously, given the limited financial resources available over the last number of years, perhaps the focus wasn't as strong as it should be, but it's been stronger than it was, and I'd like to see that can continue. I have to say, when Prime Minister Modi was here just in the last fortnight, we spoke about this and the research that is going on in Ireland in terms of polluted water and all the advantages that Ireland is actually showing in that kind of research and development is of interest to a country the scale of India, with huge numbers and so on. But in terms of the United States, obviously we don't have the same bursary facilities in universities that apply in the States, and it's clearly in an advantage for major universities in the US to be able to offer serious endowments and serious financial inducements to international people of that calibre to go and work in their places. The Health Research Board fund quite a deal of research, and the demonstration hub that they set up in Cork, and indeed in your own place, for research and innovation specialises in having IT scientists and specialists in that area. So clearly, if we're heading towards serious changes in the frontiers up ahead, science and research and innovation is something that's going to be of more importance in the time ahead. I think the STEM subjects in their own way are attracting more young people and getting them in to do the mathematics and the physics and the technology and the science. And we hope that continues, and whatever encouragement has to be given will be given. Take your point about keeping qualified scientific people here. We have a lot of them. Maybe it's not all that it should be in terms of what the state here offers. We are trying to begin addressing that in Tuesday's budget by again reducing the overall level of taxation that applies here, because that's become an issue for people to come and work in a country like Ireland, where the top rate of tax is seen as too heavy, and obviously government will make its decision on that on next week. So thank you for those comments.
Deputy Nocton, question number 6.
Thank you, Ceann Comhairle. Taoiseach, can I pick up on your comment that there's unlikely to be progress on comprehensive immigration reform this side of the US presidential election, particularly in relation to some of the commentary that we see from candidates. And I think we all want to acknowledge the executive action that has been taken by President Obama. But can I ask you, Taoiseach, is there a possibility or an indication or an opportunity that some form of immigration, an immigration bill can be introduced before John Boehner departs as Speaker of the House in the next month. And have you got any indication in relation to that? I know that Minister Flanagan met with Congressman Sensenbrenner during the week, and he intends to bring forward a piece of legislation on E3 visas, which would allow people to live and work in the United States and to emigrate from Ireland to the United States and access visas about 10,000 per annum. Can progress be made in relation to that? And the reason that I ask that, Taoiseach, is that if we're not going to be able to make progress on a comprehensive solution in the United States, can we look at specific solutions that can address specific problems that the Irish have, like the E3 visa? But in tandem with the E3 visa, to make it a success, we need to be able to ensure that young people that are stuck in the United States can come back to Ireland, avail of that E3 visa and go back into the US again. And can I ask you, Taoiseach, are you aware of the fact that the Irish Lobby for Immigration Reform are saying that there are about a third of people undocumented in the US at the moment who could avail of existing visas that are available through the Irish Embassy here? However, because of the 3- and 10-year bars that are in place for someone that is resident in the United States, undocumented, that they cannot come back to Ireland to actually avail of that. Now, seemingly Mexico, Venezuela, the Dominican Republic have been very successful in using that as a mechanism to deal with their undocumented issue. And consistently, and I've received a leaflet here again today, the issue is being raised that the Irish government have not sought of Ambassador O'Malley here in the Phoenix Park that visa. While there has been a request written by the Department of Foreign Affairs, there hasn't been a formal request by you, Taoiseach, or by the Minister for Foreign Affairs to actually formally request the introduction of this executive waiver, which would unlock a problem for about one-third of the undocumented in the United States. Now, Taoiseach, I don't know the ins and outs of this, but I would like you to clarify that for me, because this is being circulated widely that you as Taoiseach and your Minister for Foreign Affairs are not prepared to personally seek this executive waiver, and that if you did that, that this would be made available to undocumented Irish in the United States and could allow a significant number of those to come back to Ireland to avail of a visa to go back into the US. And I think clarity on that issue is needed. And if we could see some progress, even in the current short window that's there by John Boehner, that he could progress an issue, I think every opportunity needs to be taken to see if we can push that along.
Taoiseach?
Well, Deputy Nathan would be aware from his experience of how this operates in the States in terms of having two houses that function, both Senate and Congress. And given what's happening there at the moment, where there's a degree of polarity between the two houses and between the two major parties, I just don't see it happening. I might be wrong. I hope I am. President Obama made his decision, executive decision, which is quite limited, blocked in the Houses afterwards. As I say, I met with Speaker Boehner, Representative McConnell, Representative Reid, Representative Leahy, Friends of Ireland, and all of that, made this case very strongly. Some of the politicians would say, well, we see an opportunity to tag one element of a bill onto another and that it will go through on the House, but then you don't have the votes. Can you get X number of Democrats, X number of Republicans? It hasn't worked with Speaker Boehner in full situ, and with respect to them all, I just don't see it moving along now. So Ms. Flanagan did meet with Representative Jim Sensenbrenner. Another attempt to get E3s. I would hope that might yield some progress. There is the facility that Australia has never used up all its visas, and maybe perhaps that these might be transferable to another country. that might not be possible. It might be taken as a very poor signal from one country that hasn't used up all its visas that were allocated to it. But we have personnel who could do that. But I'll tell you something else, Deputy Naughton. I'm very concerned now at what's purported to happen in respect of J1 visas. You're aware that we get obviously 7,500 of young people who go to America every year on a J1 visa. And these are extraordinary opportunities for young people to experience American life, the personality of America, to work in America, make new contacts. Obviously, it brought its own tragedy in Berkeley earlier this year. But because of a series of issues that have arisen, the authorities that actually issue J1 visas seem now to be bent on introducing a requirement that there be pre-employment for young people before they would go. The extent of paperwork and administration that may be involved here, I'm unaware of. But if that were to happen, that would lead to two things, I think. Either a serious reduction in the number of J1 visas that would be granted to Ireland, perhaps down by as much as 60 or 80%, or people who would travel out on holiday visas and then decide to work illegally, which would only cause trouble for themselves and for everybody else afterwards. So here are a number of things that really do require political clarity about what's required. When I met Senator McCain about this matter, he said that, thousands and thousands and thousands of those workers who come in from Mexico, that they might be better having a short-term working visa, because many of them go back home to their families when the crops are all in and the harvest is gathered, as the song used to say. Woody Guthrie. Woody Guthrie, I'm sure my age. Woody Guthrie, yeah. In any event, I believe that this is going to be really problematic, particularly for a country like Ireland. And given the sort of nature of our traditional connection, where 50, 60 years ago and before, when people left, they never came back, it's changed now. But I really believe that the J1 system has been so important in keeping that connection in a modern sense alive, where young people you meet in university or all over the country, worked in America for the summer, and all of that it keeps those connections between our two countries very much alive currently and for the future. But if that's going to be reduced seriously, I believe it would cause real problems for relationships in the time ahead. So I think Deputy Naughton, everybody in the House here would have the same view, I think, that we'd like to have a streamlined, effective strategy. But it requires political will, and it requires political acceptance. And unfortunately, because of the situation that applies between the Congress and the Senate, that's not there at the moment. So while you have some members of Republican Party and some members of Democratic Party are willing to work on these things to get the numbers and to have the facility to tag it onto an existing bill to go through towards the end of the session is what's required. When I was out there last year, the opportunity was being put forward very strongly that the best time to do either an Irish immigration element or to have major immigration reform was going to be at the start of the last session, from sort of September, October of last year, and that didn't happen. Now things are moving on in the States, obviously. They're away campaigning on the different party credentials for candidacy, and I think it's going to be difficult. But I certainly work with all the members of the House here in working through our ambassador and consulates and constantly contacting the personnel there, both about E3s, about an element of immigration reform in the absence of overall immigration reform, and certainly on not to have a situation where you're going to have an abrupt ending to the J1 system as we know it, and where you'd have a dramatic introduction of a requirement for pre-employment. I think these are independent authorities that grant these visas, I think if that's to be being considered by them, and it is, that there should be a transition period during which young Irish would be able to go to many different places in the United States and not just be congregated in one or two locations, which has its own kind of implications. But I think this is a serious matter, and it's something that I'm quite prepared to talk to the ambassador here. I did mention to him before about the bar, the 3-year bar and the 10-year bar. I'll follow up on the point that you mentioned, Deputy Naughton. But for us, through Minister of Foreign Affairs and so on, and everybody else, keep in contact with the ambassador and consulates and American political representatives. But unfortunately, I feel it deep down that you're not going to have a major piece of immigration reform now. And if the Sensenbrenner thing works, or the efforts being made now by Ambassador Anderson come to fruition to give a few extra visas that are in the system but that are not allocated to Ireland, that might be of interest to us as well.
Deputy MacDonald,